Welcome to Shell Sugar Rush. Welcome back if you've been here before. Today I'm going to be sharing these adorable Valentine Cake Pops, including some tips and tricks to make this an easy, stress-free process for you. So if you enjoy things like this, stick around and watch me make them. So we're going to begin here with 4 6-inch layers of white velvet cake. And I am going to just crumble this up till I get it to a very fine consistency. You can cut off the edges if you want to, but I find that it really doesn't make much of a difference once everything is crumbled really well. And you can do this process with a food processor as well. I have seen people do that, but honestly for me, I prefer to do it this way so that I know every piece of my cake is to the consistency that I want it to. And it does take a lot of time and patience for this part, but for these little treats it will definitely be worth it in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and finish getting this crumbled up, and then we'll check our consistency at that point. So now here I'm going to just take a little bit and just mash it in my hand, and I'll roll it a little bit and it definitely crumbles. So, but this just kind of gives me an idea of where that moisture level is and kind of how much buttercream I want to start with. So you can see here I put, a pretty generous amount of buttercream because this is, after all, 4 cake layers. So I'm just going to kind of fold that in, and I will continue to kind of just move it around between my fingers and get it all in there and get that buttercream through every piece of that cake. So I'm going to go ahead and continue this process, and then we'll check it again and see where we're at. So now we're going to check it again now that we've got that buttercream good and in there. So you can see here I like to take a little bit and just kind of smush it between my fingers or my hands and get it nice and doughy, and then roll it up. And as I break it open, I can see that it's still a bit on the dry side. So of course, just to be sure, I'm going to move everything around a little bit more, and I'm going to actually test another piece here. And I will do the same thing, just kind of smush it between my, in my hands a little bit, roll it, and I can see that, of course, there's cracks, and like I said, you can kind of look at it and tell it's still a bit on the dry side. So at this point, I'm definitely going to add some more of the buttercream, and here I won't add as much as the first time just because I know at this point I just want a little bit more, and it's always better to go a little bit at a time and make sure you don't overdo it versus putting too much, because then you can't go back unless you have some extra cake laying around to add to the to the bowl. So at this point I'm going to work in that buttercream that I've added just as I did before, and of course you want it to be at that perfect consistency because you need to have your dough firm so that you'll have a good dough that is safe for dipping without falling apart. If your dough is too soft and there's too much buttercream, it's just not going to hold up well on a stick, especially when you start dipping. So if you've ever had this problem with cake pops, if you've ever tried to make them and started that dipping process and your cake pops were just too loose because there was too much buttercream in there, you would know that, of course, once you start dipping, they tend to not hold up very well. So anyway, I think we're getting here to the point where we need to be. And you can see here that I usually have my scale out during this process. I'm really at the point now where I can pretty much grab a piece and I know it's probably around an ounce. But, I just like to have the scale to be, it just gives me that reassurance so that I know that all of my cake pops are going to be the same size or close to it. And usually I'll, if I drop some on there and it's, 1.1 ounces or 1.2, I'm okay with that. But if it, hits 3 to 5, then usually I'll take a little pinch away. So here you can see, I'm doing the same process I did before. I'm taking a little bit of that cake dough and just moving it back and forth between my hands just to kind of really bind it together well. And then I will do the rolling process. And I like to roll it between my hands and kind of cup my hands. I feel like if I cup my hands with the cake ball inside, that helps me to get a better roll on it. They don't always come out perfect, but of course they're a lot better than, when I first started making them years ago. But here you can see that process, and I try to put pressure as well. When I cup that little cake ball between my hands, I'm rolling, but I'm also putting some pressure on it as I'm rolling, because I feel like this just gets a nice, tight, firm roll to it. Now, I will tell you that if you're not used to doing this, if you roll a lot of these, you will have some sore arms and shoulders. That is one thing that I learned real quick. So, of course, not so much now, but in the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of these cake balls rolled, and then I am going to actually pop them in the refrigerator. I don't freeze mine or anything like that, but I do like to pop them in the refrigerator just for a few minutes to make sure they're nice and firm before I actually start putting my sticks in. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that process now, and then we'll move on to putting our sticks in them. Okay, so our cake balls are ready for our sticks, and I did end up getting 42 cake balls out of that batch. Actually, I stopped once I filled up the tray, but I did have a little bit left, so I could have squeezed out a few more and probably ended up with 45 or 46. But this is fine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm putting the sticks in, and I'm using the 6-inch lollipop sticks. And I've got some melted chocolate here, and I'm just dipping that end and kind of wiping it on the side because I don't want too much, but I definitely want to have enough. So what I'm doing is just pushing the stick straight down into the center, and I like to make sure the stick goes into the cake ball about halfway, just for good security in there. So here I am doing that, and I also usually leave them on the tray like this and just stick it in from the top and let it set in the same way. So what I'm going to do here is finish putting all the sticks in, and then since the cake the cake balls are a little cold from being in the refrigerator for a few minutes, that will actually help that chocolate set up to secure that stick. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and finish them all and just let them sit here for about 10 minutes or so, and then I will start dipping them into some chocolate. So at this point, we're ready to dip our cake pops, and they are at room temperature. I know I had mentioned before about some people like to put them in the freezer or refrigerator, and I will tell you that, that may work for some people, but it's something that never worked for me. I tried a lot of different methods in the beginning when I started making cake pops, and just learned the hard way that if you put your cake pops in the freezer or the refrigerator and they are too cold when you get ready to dip them, or if your chocolate is too hot, you can be assured that once that chocolate sets, you are going to have cracks in your cake pops. So you definitely want them at room temperature for dipping. And you can see here, because the cake pops are nice and firm, that process is easy, and that's why it's so important to get the right consistency on your cake pops. So what I'm doing here is just taking my cake pop and I am dipping it down in one motion and back up. You don't want to leave it in the chocolate too long. Of course, that will start to weigh heavy on your cake pop as well, and that can cause the cake pop to slip off of the stick. So you do want it to be a quick motion. And I just shake off the excess and I flip my cake pop over and kind of shake it a little bit more just to really even out that chocolate on the top of it, so that you don't get a ball or a bunch of chocolate sitting on top of your cake pop. So you can see here I'm dipping and then just gently shaking off that excess, and when I feel like it's kind of to the point where it's going to stop running, then I am going to flip it over and kind of just give it a little jiggle and make sure, like I said, to kind of spread out that chocolate on top. And here I am just sticking mine into 2 little styrofoam blocks that I have, and giving them a chance to set up. And I also definitely want to mention that when you are dipping your cake pops, you always want to make sure you have something that is fairly deep. This measuring glass that I have, actually it's not very skinny, but I do have a good bit of chocolate in here, so I am able to tilt it and make sure that cake pop is just going in and right back out. But you definitely want to make sure that you have something that's going to hold the chocolate at least deep enough for your cake pop to go all the way in without touching the bottom. That's just really important, because if you have to sit it in there and swirl it around and keep it in there for any length of time, that chocolate is going to start to pull on that cake pop. And definitely if you're using something where you have to touch the bottom with that cake pop, then you tend to kind of get a little bit of a suction, and again you risk pulling that pop off of that stick. And you will actually see here in a minute, as my chocolate does get lower in this measuring glass, then I am going to switch to a smaller measuring glass that is a bit skinnier, so that way my chocolate will just come up higher and I won't run the risk of having to keep that cake pop in there too long, or rolling it around, or dipping all the way to the bottom. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and finish getting the rest of these cake pops dipped, and the majority of them are actually going to be used for a cow print design that will be going to a party, which will be in a later video. But I am going to be using some of them to share with you a few simple Valentine's designs that you can do for Valentine's Day with these. So make sure you stick around to the end for that. Okay, so we're ready for some decor, and I have some melted pink chocolate here, and for this one I'm just going to do a simple drizzle, and you can see how I'm holding the bag. I'm holding it high and keeping that cake pop very still, and just using that bag going back and forth across to get the perfect drizzle. And here I'm just putting some sanding sugar, just some pink sanding sugar, on those drizzled lines while they are still wet, so that it can adhere nicely to the cake pop. And now I've also got some red chocolate ready to go. So, and actually for that I did use candy melts. So same thing, I'm keeping that still other than the rotating of the cake pop to get that drizzle all around it, but I am actually moving the bag back and forth to get that drizzle there. And here I'm using some red sanding sugar, and you can see here I like to use coffee filters under mine just to catch the different sprinkles or sugar that I use, and that will make, of course, for easy cleanup later. So on this next one I am going to do again the same thing with the red drizzle, but I am going to actually use some of my sprinkles on this one. And I just want to, put a pretty generous amount on there, because I really want to catch all of those lines with the sprinkle. And you can see how nice that comes out. And then I'm going to go ahead and do one with the pink as well. And for this one, I'm going to pull out my diamond dust. And this is by Sugar Art. It's the light pink diamond dust. So for this one, I'm going to, again, use the pink for the drizzle on the cake pop. And then I'm going to go over that while it's wet with some of the pink diamond dust. And this will give a nice, nice luster to it, a nice shiny look. And you can see here, I'm just sprinkling it, you know, again, pretty generously onto that wet drizzle. And then this one will be nice and shiny. I just absolutely love using the diamond dust. I just think it gives anything an extra pop. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and set this aside. That way I don't accidentally dump it. And I'm going to do a swirl pattern on these next two. And this is a bit tricky, but you know, you can, easily get the hang of it, and you can practice on some parchment paper as well before you do it on the cake pop. Mine are not perfect, but they're certainly better than they were in the beginning. And it's just really a simple S shape, kind of with an extra curl in there. And you can do the S shape, or if you have trouble with that, you can always just do the circular motion with that swirl in the center. And I've seen it done that way as well. But you can see here, my tip that's cut in my bag is not real thin, so these are on the thicker side. And of course, I'm adding sanding sugar for that kind of, just extra touch on these. So of course, once you add the sanding sugar to all the wet swirls, it actually makes them look a little thicker. So, not as defined as if you were just doing, the drizzle on there. So, but you can see here it looks quite nice. And now I'm going to do that last one the same way with the red. And then I'm going to add some chocolates to a couple of them. And then they will be complete. Of course, here you can see what I was referring to earlier about the easy cleanup with the coffee filters, because you can pour your sprinkles right back into those little containers. So I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope you got a lot out of it. Be sure and let me know what you thought about this in the comments, and let me know if you make some for Valentine's Day. And if you did enjoy the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you'll be notified when I upload more treats in the future. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you next time.